Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive hall on Zentara Prime. The ceiling stretched high above him, filled with floating platforms where alien representatives sat in judgment. He could feel their eyes watching him from every direction. Some looked at him with disgust. Others seemed curious. Most just looked bored. Jake wore his best uniform, the blue and gold colors of Earth's diplomatic service. The medals on his chest felt heavy today. He had earned each one protecting human colonies and keeping peace with alien neighbors. Now those same neighbors wanted to throw humanity out of the galaxy. The hall buzzed with alien voices speaking in dozens of languages. Jake understood most of them thanks to his translator implant. The conversations were not friendly. The Veltar representatives whispered about human aggression. The Nexari delegates complained about human technology advancing too fast. Everyone seemed to agree that humans were a problem that needed solving. Admiral Lisa Carter sat in the observation area above. She was the toughest military officer Jake knew. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her face showed no emotion. But Jake could see the anger in her dark eyes. 20 years of faithful service to the Galactic Council meant nothing today. Ambassador Kevin Blake sat beside Admiral Carter. His usually calm face looked tired. Kevin had spent months trying to prevent this day. He had made deals, offered compromises, and begged other species to speak for humanity. Nothing had worked. The decision was already made before the trial began. High Arbiter Zeflon rose from the central platform. The tall alien looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard. His feathers were bright purple and his eyes glowed yellow. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. The Galactic Council has reached its decision regarding the human species, Zeflon announced. His words were translated instantly into hundreds of languages. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, we find humanity guilty of multiple violations of galactic law. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had known this was coming, but hearing it made it real. First, humans have engaged in reckless terraforming practices that damage natural ecosystems. Second, humans have built military forces beyond agreed limits, without council approval. Third, and most serious, humans have developed quantum weapons in direct violation of the sacred technology accords. The hall erupted in alien voices. Some cheered, others argued. Jake noticed that not all species seemed happy with the decision. The younger Nexari delegates looked uncomfortable. A few Altari representatives shook their heads sadly. Zeflon raised his hand for silence. Therefore, by unanimous vote of the Inner Council, humanity is expelled from the galactic community. All human settlements outside the Sol system must be abandoned within 1 standard year. Any human presence in council space after that time will be considered an act of war. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Not just expelled from the council, but from their own colonies. Millions of humans would have to leave homes they had built over generations. Children born on distant worlds would see Earth for the first time as refugees. Ambassador Blake stood slowly. His voice was steady when he spoke. The human delegation accepts this decision with dignity. We ask only for safe passage for our civilians and time to properly evacuate our settlements. Granted, Zeflon replied. You have 1 year. Use it wisely. As the alien representatives began to leave, Jake walked over to join Blake and Admiral Carter. Other human delegates gathered around them. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, Earth's top expert on alien biology, was the first to speak. They think they're getting rid of a problem, she said quietly. They have no idea what they just did. Admiral Carter nodded. Exiling us might be the biggest mistake they ever made. Ambassador Blake looked around at his team. These were good people who had served humanity with honor. Now they were being thrown out like criminals. We need to get home and start planning. We have a year to evacuate 3 million colonists and move everything we can't leave behind. The human ships waited in orbit above Zentara Prime. As Jake boarded the transport that would take him home, he looked back at the alien world one last time. The Council thought they were punishing humanity. They thought exile would make humans weak and scattered. They were wrong. During the long flight back to Earth, Jake sat with Dr. Rodriguez in the ship's common area. She was reading reports on her tablet, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked. Amy looked up with a small smile. "I'm thinking about all the star charts we never shared with the Council, all the worlds we found but never reported, all the technology we developed in secret just in case something like this happened." Jake raised an eyebrow. "We planned for this?" "Not this exactly," Amy replied. "But smart people always have backup plans. The Council thinks they know everything about human space. They think they know all our capabilities. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the human delegation away from Council space for the last time as members. Behind them, the aliens celebrated their victory. Ahead of them, Earth waited with questions that needed answers. President Maria Santos was already preparing to address the world when they arrived. The news would shock humanity, but Jake was beginning to think it might not be the disaster everyone expected. Humans had always done their best work when their backs were against the wall. As Jake looked out at the stars streaming past the ship's windows, he felt something unexpected. Not fear or sadness, but excitement. Humanity was about to be free from Council rules and restrictions for the first time in 2 centuries. The galaxy was huge, and most of it had never been explored. The Council controlled only a small part of known space. Beyond their borders lay endless possibilities. The exile was meant to be humanity's punishment. Jake was starting to think it might be their greatest opportunity instead. 6 months had passed since the Council's verdict, and Fleet Admiral Ben Turner stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the largest movement of people in human history. Thousands of ships filled the space around New Singapore Colony, preparing for departure. Cargo vessels loaded with machinery and supplies floated next to passenger transports packed with families. Military escorts waited at the edges of the fleet. Ben had commanded fleets before, but never anything like this. Moving 3 million people across hundreds of light years was a nightmare of logistics. Every ship needed fuel, food, and repair, supplies. Every family needed to know where they were going and when they would arrive. Every piece of equipment had to be cataloged and assigned to the right transport. The worst part was watching the faces of the colonists as they boarded the ships. These people had built lives on worlds far from Earth. Their children were born under alien suns. Now they had to leave everything behind because the Council feared human progress. Dr. Susan Wright floated beside Ben in the zero-gravity command center. Her tablet showed evacuation schedules for dozens of colonies. As head of the Colonial Development Initiative, she was responsible for making sure the exodus went smoothly. "The Kepler colony ships are ready to depart," she reported. "That's the last of the Outer Rim settlements. We're actually ahead of schedule." Ben nodded but didn't smile. Being ahead of schedule was good, but it meant people were abandoning their homes faster than expected. That suggested panic, not organization. "What about the hidden supply caches?" he asked quietly. Susan glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "Roy Palmer's teams have established supply points in 47 systems. The Council has no idea they exist. If we ever need to come back to this region, we'll have fuel and equipment waiting." The plan was risky but necessary. Officially, humanity was abandoning all territory outside the Sol system. Unofficially, they were leaving behind everything they might need for a future return. Hidden bases, supply depots, and observation posts would remain scattered throughout the region, waiting for the day humans might reclaim their lost worlds. Captain. Nick Adams was already exploring that future. His ship, New Horizon, had jumped beyond Council space 3 weeks ago. The reports coming back changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. Ben pulled up Nick's latest transmission. On his personal screen, the young captain's excited face filled the display. Behind him, the bridge of New Horizon showed star charts that made Ben's heart race. "Admiral, you need to see this," Nick's recorded voice said. "We've mapped 12 systems in the last week alone. 7 have habitable worlds. 3 have rare mineral deposits the Council would kill for. And here's the best part, sir. There's no sign of intelligent life, no Council presence, no territorial claims. It's completely empty space, just waiting for us." Ben felt a smile tug. at his lips for the first time in weeks. The Council thought they were driving humanity into a small corner of the galaxy. Instead, they were pushing humans toward the largest unexplored region of space anyone had ever found. Engineer Kate Wilson was already preparing for that opportunity. Her Genesis pod project had started as a way to quickly establish temporary settlements during the evacuation. Now it looked like the key to rapid expansion in unexplored space. Kate floated over to Ben's position, pulling herself along the handholds. Her red hair was tied back and her clothes were covered in grease stains from working on the pod prototypes. "Genesis pods are working better than expected," she reported. "We can deploy a basic settlement for 500 people in less than 48 hours. With the automated systems, colonists can be growing food and manufacturing basic supplies within a week of landing." Ben studied the technical specifications on Kate's tablet. The pods were essentially self-contained colonies that could be dropped on any habitable world. They included living quarters, power generation, food production, and basic manufacturing. Most importantly, they could be quickly packed up and moved if necessary. "How many can we build?" Ben asked. "With current resources, maybe 200 pods. But if we can establish industrial facilities in the new territories, we could build thousands." Dr. Alex Murphy's breakthrough made that expansion possible. His quantum communication system allowed instant contact across any distance. Unlike the Council's slower relay networks, humans could coordinate operations in real time across multiple star systems. Alex demonstrated the system from his laboratory ship. Speaking to Ben from a distance of 50 light-years, his voice came through as clearly as if he were in the same room. "The quantum entanglement remains stable across any distance we've tested," Alex explained. "Each ship, colony, and outpost can stay in constant contact with Earth Command. We can coordinate the movement of entire fleets faster than the Council can send a single message." President Santos appeared on Ben's main screen from Earth. Her face looked tired but determined. The weight of leading humanity through its greatest crisis showed in the lines around her eyes. "Admiral Turner, I'm about to address the Council one final time," she said. "Our last official colonies will be evacuated within the week. I want to thank them for teaching us an important lesson." Ben raised an eyebrow. "What lesson is that, Madam President?" Santos smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young senator Ben remembered from years ago. "That we were thinking too small. The Council controlled our expansion for 2 centuries. They limited where we could go and what we could build. Now we're free to explore the entire galaxy." The President's final message to the Council was broadcast across known space. Ben watched it with his senior staff as Santos spoke from the Oval Office on Earth. "To the members of the Galactic Council, humanity offers its thanks for this opportunity to forge our own path among the stars. We accept this exile not as punishment, but as liberation. You have freed us from the restrictions that limited our potential. For that gift, we are grateful." The message was diplomatic and polite, but Ben heard the real meaning. Humanity was saying goodbye to the Council forever. There would be no begging for readmission, no attempts to negotiate a return. Humans were moving on to bigger and better things. As the last transport ships departed Council space, Ben gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. The evacuation was complete, but their real work was just beginning. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the exodus is over. Now we start building an empire." 3 years had passed since humanity left Council space, and Admiral Chris Barnes watched the sun rise over New Geneva Station through his office window. The massive structure floated in orbit around a blue and green world that had been lifeless, rock just 2 years ago. Now forests covered the continents and cities dotted the coastlines. Chris still remembered the day they arrived in this empty system. The star charts showed nothing special about it. No rare minerals, no strategic value, no reason for the Council to care. That made it perfect for humanity's first major settlement beyond their old borders. The construction of New Geneva Station had taken 18 months of constant work. Human engineers and construction crews worked around the clock to build humanity's new capital. The station was bigger than anything the Council had ever constructed, with space for 500,000 people and industrial facilities that could build entire fleets. Dr. Rachel Stone joined Chris at the observation window. Her hair had gone gray during the terraforming project, but her eyes still sparkled with excitement when she talked about her work. As director of the Rapid Terraforming Project, she had transformed 6 dead worlds into garden planets in less than 3 years. The atmospheric processors on Kepler-2 are ahead of schedule, she reported. The oxygen levels will be breathable. For humans within 6 months. We can start moving colonists there by the end of the year. Chris nodded as he reviewed the reports on his tablet. Rachel's breakthrough had changed everything. The Council's terraforming methods took decades to make a world habitable. Human technology could do it in months. Each new world became a foundation for further expansion into unexplored space. How many worlds can we handle at once? Chris asked. With current resources, we can terraform 12 worlds simultaneously, Rachel replied. But Tony Clark's exploration, teams are finding new candidates faster than we can process them. Captain Tony Clark commanded the exploration vessel Endeavour, leading humanity's push into the unknown regions of space. His ship had mapped over 100 star systems in the EI. Past 3 years, most were empty, but the few that contained habitable worlds were exactly what humanity needed. Tony's latest report showed discoveries that made Chris excited about the future. Rare metals that the Council paid enormous prices for were common in the unexplored regions. Energy sources that could power entire civilizations waited to be harvested. Best of all, there were no other intelligent species to complicate territorial claims. Manufacturing director Helen Price had turned those discoveries into the foundation of human industrial power. Unlike the Council's centralized factories, Helen designed a distributed network of automated facilities. Each new world got its own manufacturing base that could produce everything from farming equipment to starship components. Helen floated into Chris's office carrying a cup of coffee and a satisfied smile. Her engineering background showed in her practical clothes and tool belt, but her mind for organization had made her one of the most important people in human space. The industrial output reports are in, she announced. We're producing more advanced technology than we ever did in Council space. Without their restrictions and regulations, our factories can build things we only dreamed about before. Chris O. looked at the production numbers and whistled softly. Starship construction was up 300%. Advanced electronics production had increased by 500%. Most impressive of all, humans were building weapons and defense, systems that made Council technology look primitive. The real breakthrough came from Dr. Paul Davis and his research team. Paul had spent years studying alien artifacts found in the ruins of ancient civilizations. These long-dead species had built technology far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Now, human scientists were learning to combine those ancient secrets with human innovation. Paul's laboratory occupied an entire section of New Geneva Station. Behind locked doors and security shields, human researchers worked to unlock the mysteries of galactic history. Their discoveries were changing humanity's understanding of what was possible. The energy crystals we found on Vega 7 are unlike anything in Council science, Paul explained during his weekly briefing. They can store and release power on a scale that makes our current reactors look like toys. If we can learn to manufacture them, our ships and stations will have unlimited energy. The military applications were obvious to General Amy Foster. As commander of the Independent Defense Force, she was training a new generation of human warriors for the challenges ahead. Her philosophy was simple: prepare for everything and trust no one outside humanity. Amy's training facilities on New Geneva Station operated 24 hours a day. Young men and women from across human space came to learn tactics, strategy, and combat skills. But they also learned something more important. They learned to think like humans, not like Council species. The Council fights by rules, Amy explained to her latest class of officer candidates. They have protocols for everything: formal challenges, structured battles, predictable strategies. We don't fight like that. We fight to win. The human military was built around flexibility and innovation. Small units that could think for themselves, ships that could adapt to any situation, weapons that could be quickly modified for new threats. Most importantly, commanders who understood that the best battle plan was the one the enemy never expected. As New Geneva Station celebrated its 3rd anniversary, Humanity controlled 17 star systems and maintained a growing fleet of advanced vessels. The population of human space had grown to over 4 million people. Industrial output exceeded anything humanity had achieved in Council space. President Daniel White arrived from Earth for the anniversary celebration. His ship, escorted by a squadron of the new Aurora-class destroyers, docked at New Geneva Station. To crowds of cheering citizens, the man who had been elected to lead humanity through its exile was now presiding over its rebirth as a galactic power. Daniel addressed the celebration from the station's main assembly hall. Representatives from all 17 human worlds attended, along with military officers, scientists, and industrial leaders. The speech was broadcast to every human settlement across known space. 3 years ago, the Council told us we had no place in their galaxy, Daniel said. They were right. We have no place in their small, limited view of what's possible. We belong in our own galaxy where human dreams have no boundaries and human potential has no limits. The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed through the stations, corridors. Children who had been born in exile would grow up as citizens of humanity's new empire. The species that had been cast out as troublemakers was becoming the most powerful force in unexplored space. Chris watched the celebration from his office window and smiled. The Foundation years were ending. Humanity was ready for whatever came next. Commander Steve Rogers stood on the bridge of his ship, the Defiance, watching Council patrol vessels through his stealth screens. The enemy ships moved in standard formation, following predictable routes through what they thought was empty space. They had no idea that human vessels were watching their every move. The Council's first hint that humanity had not simply vanished came from Veltar trading ships reporting strange encounters in the outer systems. Cargo vessels disappeared for hours, then reappeared with no memory of what happened. Survey teams found equipment in places where no one should have been. Most disturbing of all, some traders reported seeing ships that looked human but used technology beyond anything the Council remembered. Steve's Shadow Fleet had been conducting these operations for 6 months. His ships were built using the new stealth technology developed from ancient alien artifacts. They could appear and disappear like ghosts, striking Council installations and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. The psychological effect was exactly what humanity intended. Intelligence Director Carol Martinez had spent years building a network of agents throughout Council space. Her people included humans who had chosen to stay behind, aliens who sympathized with humanity's cause, and paid informants who sold Council secrets for the right price. The information they provided gave humanity a complete picture of Council activities. Carol's latest report made Steve smile as he read it on his private screen. The Council was fracturing from within. Member species were questioning the wisdom of expelling humanity. The Nexari Federation faced protests from their younger generation, who called the exile a historic mistake. Even some Veltar nobles were beginning to wonder if they had created a more dangerous enemy. Council Survey Squadron approaching Grid 7, reported Lieutenant Commander Janet Davis from the sensor station. 3 ships, standard exploration configuration. They're heading directly for the Kepler system. Steve studied the tactical display. The Council ships were finally venturing into space they thought humanity had abandoned. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Signal the patrol squadron, Steve ordered. Time to give our visitors a proper welcome. Captain Frank Lopez commanded the patrol squadron assigned to protect human interests in the Kepler region. His 3 ships were fast attack vessels designed for hit-and-run operations. They carried the latest quantum weapons developed by human scientists, weapons that could penetrate Council shields like they were made of paper. The encounter was brief but decisive. Council sensors detected the human ships just moments before the attack began. Energy beams that should have been absorbed by their shields instead tore through their hulls like fire through cloth. 2 Council ships were disabled within minutes. The 3rd managed to escape, but not before its crew saw capabilities that would terrify the Council leadership. Frank's report to Steve was professional, but satisfied. All objectives achieved, Commander. Council vessels neutralized with minimal damage to our forces. 1 enemy ship escaped as planned. They'll carry word back to the Council about what they faced. Steve nodded as he reviewed the battle recordings. The encounter had been carefully staged to demonstrate human superiority without revealing the full extent of their capabilities. The Council needed to know they were dealing with a changed humanity, but they didn't need to know everything. Dr. Grace Kelly's breakthrough in artificial intelligence had given humanity an advantage the Council couldn't match. The Strategic Planning Network was an AI system that could coordinate operations across multiple star systems simultaneously. It analyzed enemy movements, predicted their responses, and suggested counter-strategies faster than any organic mind could process. Grace monitored the system from her laboratory on New Geneva Station. Banks of quantum computers hummed around her as the AI processed information from thousands of sources. Human agents, automated sensors, captured communications, and statistical analysis all fed into the network's calculations. The AI predicts a 67% chance that the Council will send a larger fleet to investigate the Kepler incident, Grace reported during the daily intelligence briefing. It also suggests that Admiral Zethkar of the Veltar will personally command the response force. General Laura Thompson used that information to plan Operation Reclamation. For too long, humanity had allowed the Council to occupy worlds that rightfully belonged to human colonists. It was time to take them back. Laura's forces struck 12 Council installations simultaneously across 6 star systems. The attacks were perfectly coordinated, hitting supply depots, communication relays, and administrative centers at exactly the same moment. By the time Council forces could respond, the human raiders had completed their missions and vanished into space. The most important target was New Singapore Colony, the world where humanity's exile had begun. Council administrators had moved in immediately after the evacuation, claiming the human-built infrastructure for their own use. They found out too late that the colonists had left more than empty buildings behind. Hidden systems activated throughout. The colony as human commandos landed under cover of darkness. Power grids failed, communication networks crashed, and automated defenses turned against their Council operators. Within hours, the colony was back under human control, and Council forces were fleeing in panic. High Arbiter Zephlon convened an emergency session of the Inner Council. The proud alien leader who had pronounced humanity's exile now faced reports that made his feathers tremble with rage. Human forces had struck at the heart of Council territory and made the most powerful military in the galaxy look helpless. "This is intolerable," Zephlon declared to the assembled representatives. "The humans were expelled to prevent exactly this kind of aggressive behavior. Now they attack us from the shadows, like criminals and terrorists." But other voices in the Council were beginning to question their leader's judgment. Ambassador Kethlar of the Altari Republic stood to address the assembly. His people had always maintained friendly relations with humanity, and the exile had cost them valuable trade partnerships. "With respect, High Arbiter, we created this problem ourselves," Kethlar said. "We expelled a species that had never threatened galactic peace. We drove them from their homes because we feared their progress. Now we face the consequences of that fear." Similar dissent was spreading throughout Council space. Species that had remained neutral during the exile were choosing sides as reports of human capabilities spread. The Kethvar clans openly criticized the Council's policies. Free colonies along the rim began expressing sympathy for humanity's cause. Steve received updates on these political developments while planning his next operation. The Shadow War was achieving more than military objectives. It was breaking apart the unity that had made the Council powerful for thousands of years. As the Defiance prepared for another stealth mission, Steve reflected on how much had changed since the exile. Humanity had been cast out as a dangerous nuisance. Now they had become the nightmare that kept Council leaders awake at night. The war in the shadows was just beginning, but Steve already knew how it would end. The Council had made humanity their enemy. Now they would learn what human enemies were capable of achieving. President Daniel White stood before the cameras in his office on New Geneva Station, preparing to deliver the message that would change galactic history. 5 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the species that had been driven from Council space was ready to announce its return as a major power. Behind Daniel, Through the office windows, the lights of 47 human star systems twinkled in the darkness. Each point of light represented worlds that had been transformed from empty rock into thriving colonies. 12 billion humans now called the Terran Federation home, and their new nation was about to make its presence known to the galaxy, to all species throughout the galaxy. Daniel began, his voice carrying across quantum communication networks to every corner of known space. I am Daniel White, elected president of the Terran Federation. Today, humanity extends an invitation to join a new era of galactic civilization. The message was broadcast simultaneously in hundreds of languages. Human translation technology had advanced far beyond council capabilities, allowing perfect communication with any species that wished to listen. The words reached alien worlds that had never heard from humanity directly. The Terran Federation offers trade partnerships, mutual defense agreements, and technological exchange to any species ready to embrace true equality among the stars. We believe that diversity makes civilization stronger, and that cooperation achieves more than domination. Admiral Patricia Green watched the broadcast from the bridge of her flagship, the Endeavour, as it led the Federation's first fleet on its diplomatic mission to the Altari Republic. The fleet represented humanity's new naval power, ships built with advanced technology and crewed by officers who had learned to think beyond council limitations. Patricia had been chosen to command the first fleet because of her reputation for diplomacy as much as her military skills. The Federation's approach to galactic relations was different from the Council's methods. Instead of demanding submission, humans offered partnership. Instead of threatening punishment, they promised mutual benefit. The Altari were the first to respond to humanity's invitation. Ambassador Kethlar had spent years defending human interests in the Council, and his people had suffered economically from the loss of human trade. When Patricia's fleet arrived at Altari Prime, they were greeted as liberators rather than invaders. The Altari Republic formally requests admission to the Terran Federation, Kethlar announced during the welcoming ceremony. We believe that the future belongs to those species brave enough to embrace change and cooperation. The Council's response was predictably hostile. High Arbiter Zephlon issued demands for the immediate dissolution of the Terran Federation and threatened military action if humanity continued to interfere in galactic affairs. But his threats carried less weight than they once had. Dr. Charles Turner demonstrated exactly why during a public broadcast from Earth's orbital defense platforms. The elderly scientist had spent years developing humanity's defensive capabilities, and his quantum barrier technology made human space virtually impregnable. The Council seems to have forgotten that humanity values peace above all else, Charles said as energy fields shimmered around Earth like aurora lights. These defensive systems exist to protect our worlds and our allies from any aggression. We hope they will never be needed, but we are prepared if they are. The demonstration was broadcast across the galaxy, showing energy barriers that absorbed and redirected the most powerful weapons the Council possessed. Human space fortresses protected by quantum shields could withstand attacks that would destroy entire fleets. The technology made invasion of human territory impossible. More species began to reconsider their positions as word of human capabilities spread. The Kethvar clans announced their withdrawal from the Council and requested Federation membership. The free colonies of the Rim worlds followed within days. Even some member species that remained loyal to the Council began negotiating trade agreements with human representatives. Commander Janet Davis led the joint human-alien fleet that would face the Council's final attempt to crush the Federation. The Battle of Kepler Station had been planned by both sides as the decisive engagement of the conflict. The Council committed their most powerful warships under the personal command of High Arbiter Zephlon himself. The battle lasted 6 hours and became a demonstration of everything humanity had learned during their years in exile. Human ships moved with coordination impossible under Council command structures. Their weapons penetrated enemy defenses designed to stop conventional attacks. Most importantly, their crews fought with the desperation of people defending their homes and freedom. Janet watched from the bridge of the Federation flagship as Council formations broke apart under human attack. Ships that had terrorized alien worlds for centuries fled before vessels built in human shipyards. The great Zephlon himself abandoned his flagship when quantum torpedoes breached its supposedly impenetrable armor. "Council fleet is in full retreat," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy casualties are severe. Our losses are minimal." The victory at Kepler Station broke the Council's will to continue the war. Faced with military defeat and political collapse, the remaining Council members agreed to recognize the Terran Federation as a sovereign power. The species that had once expelled humanity now found themselves begging for the chance to negotiate with their former victims. The peace treaty was signed on Earth in a ceremony that brought together representatives from across the galaxy. President White hosted the event in Geneva, the same city where human unity had been forged centuries earlier. Now it would witness the birth of a new galactic order based on cooperation, rather than domination. High Arbiter Zephlon arrived on Earth as a defeated leader seeking terms from a species he had once dismissed as primitive troublemakers. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by the weariness of someone who had led his people to disaster through arrogance and fear. The Council formally recognizes the Terran Federation and its territorial claims, Zephlon announced during the signing ceremony. "We request the establishment of peaceful relations and the resumption of trade between our peoples." President White's response captured the spirit of humanity's triumph. The Federation accepts the Council's recognition and welcomes the opportunity for peaceful coexistence. "We harbor no hatred for those who once opposed us. The galaxy is large enough for all of us to prosper." The new Galactic Accords established the Terran Federation as an equal power to the Council, with the right to expand, defend itself, and forge alliances with any species that chose to join them. Humanity had achieved more than military victory. They had proven that their vision of galactic civilization was superior to the Council's ancient system of dominance and control. As the signing ceremony concluded, Daniel White addressed the assembled galactic leaders one final time. "You sought to limit us to one small corner of space. Instead, you taught us that the entire galaxy could be our home. For that lesson, we thank you." The Terran Federation stood ready to lead the galaxy into a new age of exploration, cooperation, and unlimited possibility. The species that had been exiled as troublemakers had returned as the architects of a better future for all sentient life among the stars.